First of all, let me introduce our guest, Mr. Antonio Soma. He is a member of the Board of Directors, Independent Director of DBK. Mr. Soma has over 20 years of work experience in financial institutions, international affairs, and other private sector organizations. Mr. Soma, my first question is about the institution of independent directors. It was formed in Kazakhstan just recently, and in your perspective, what changes are needed to make it more effective in improving corporate governance?
First of all, the importance of independent directors as an institute, especially when it comes to state-owned enterprises like DBK, cannot be overstated. And it cannot be overstated because, according to the OECD, independent directors in state-owned enterprises play a fundamental role, which is being the link between the government as the sole shareholder or main shareholder and the management of the company. Now, my experience in DBK is that independent directors are entrusted in an even bigger role, much broader and interesting as far as I'm concerned, which is support the management in guaranteeing that the strategic mandate of the company is met by the management and by all the actions. And also we are asked to play a role of advisors to the management. Each one of us, according to our expertise, in order to support the strategic initiatives and make them happen then on the ground. Now, when it comes to changes to the Institute, as you said, it's an institute that is relatively recent in the country. Therefore, from my perspective, it's still a bit too early to speak about changes. It should work for a few years, and then after a few years, assess whether there are adjustments or more fundamental changes need to be done. I would say that from my perspective, my experience so far so good. But one suggestion I feel like providing is that Kazakhstan continues and even deepens the participation in OECD stock takings into the Institute of Independent Directors, especially when it comes to corporate governance of state-owned enterprises. And this is because this will help the country ongoing have a comparison with OECD members, but also non-OECD members who participate in those stock takings, and also to keep abreast of the latest innovations when it comes to generally corporate governance for state-owned enterprises.
And what does it mean for you personally to be the independent director of DBK?
Independent director, from my perspective, is being able to bring in my own experience, not only in the financial sector, but also experience in corporate governance, also experience in public policy, and experience as a former manager of company, and support the management of DBK, support the sole shareholder of DBK in implementing the strategic mandate and in adjusting the strategic mandate when needed.
The World Bank, in its study Overcoming Stagnation of Productivity, published in November last year, focused on the fact that the growth in Kazakhstan's economy can no longer be supported by increased investment. So according to the World Bank, cardinal changes are needed to increase productivity. Given your experience in the structure of another international organization, the OECD, how do you think it is necessary to do the investment policy of Kazakhstan in order to achieve quality, high quality, sustainable economic growth?
Yeah. Okay, first of all, true investment alone are not able to sustain the growth of an economy indefinitely. And given that Kazakhstan has graduated several times in the development track, which is a very good thing. Of course, we are now in a phase where investments alone in Kazakhstan will not be able to sustain the growth. However, it should be said, to be fair, that investment will continue to play a pivotal role in Kazakhstan for the next years when it comes to the growth of the economy. That being said, in the phase where Kazakhstan is today, there is way more important for quality investment than quantity of investment. And when I mention quality of investment, I mean investments that are focused on those specific improvements of the economy that will allow to jump to the next level. And to me, today, the one most important improvement that's needed in the Kazakh economy is improvement of productivity. Now, there is another interesting finding in the World Bank study, which is that newer, smaller enterprises tend to be more productive than older and more established, bigger enterprises. And this tells us that when speaking about quality of investments, investments should be directed not necessarily into smaller and newer enterprises, but into the productivity transformation, expansion of ventures. Whether it's, again, financing small enterprises or even brand new enterprises, which is very good and of course should be continue to be done, but also when it comes to supporting bigger and more established companies into new ventures or improving their core business. And this last mission that I mentioned is definitely part of the mandate of DBK. And as a matter of fact, in the past few years, DBK has financed 66 projects to improve productivity, to expand production. Now, when making investments into transformation, improvement, expansion of the production, or even new ventures, of course, those investments are fundamental. They improve the procedures of the company, the processes, they improve the organization, but that's not enough. That's not enough because there is one element which must add to all of this in order to really reap all the effect of the new investment. And this one element is education. Both university education, vocational education, and this is very important because only when new energies are involved into the market labor, fresh energies with new state-of-the-art education, only then the economy flourishes. Now, in Kazakhstan, already a few years back, an important reform of the education system has been started, and it has concretely translated into, for example, the establishment of a brand new state-of-the-art university like Nazarbayev University. How can the finance, the real economy, and the educational system interact in a way that maximizes the good effect on the economy? Well, normally it will take a couple of generations of new students coming from this new and improved educational system to get into the market labor in order to show the effect, positive effect in the productivity, in the organizational system, in the management system, and so on and so forth. But the financial system can contribute to that. Let me give you one example. If a bank, when assessing the loans the possibility to give a loans to a company. Considered an indicator in terms of, let's call it youth indicator. That will be a additional advantage for a company that wants to push for more young labor force and therefore educated within the new educational system.
So it is only possible if the structure, in this case the bank, ready to get and involve these new students, right?
It's actually a good example of how policy measures must interact with each other in order to provide the desired effect. A new, improved, excellent education system alone will have a limited effect on the economy unless the financial system stimulates companies to hire those students that are educated in the new and improved system. And only if the new companies hire more young people, this would happen. So as you can see, there is kind of a interaction that is needed amongst different institutions. The government, educational to do the reforms, educational institutions to implement the reform, the private sector to hire the students from the educational system, and the financial institutions, whether, by the way, they are development financial institutions or commercial financial institutions, in order to stimulate all the system to work.
On the DBK board of directors, you are in charge of risk management issues. So what risks did the bank have to work hard on? And in particular, how relevant are the currency risks in DBK?
First of all, the management board of DBK is in charge and fully monitoring all the issues regarding risk and the other operational issues of the company. In the board of directors is this risk management committee, which is has a supervision role and also intervenes on the decisions for the largest project of the bank. Now, which are the main risks we look at? It's very important to understand that in DBK specifically, loans have durations which go for several years. Speaking about loans with 10 years is not an exception, it's the norm. And therefore, we fully acknowledge that the risk profile during this long time period can change, and it can change a lot for the best, but also in some cases it can degrade into a more difficult situation for several reasons. So what we do in terms of approaching DBK is that we constantly monitor the projects and the loans associated with the projects on an ongoing basis. And when we do this to assess how the project continues to be viable in terms of economic fundamentals, and therefore how the project is able to repay the loan. But we don't stop there. We really have a customer-oriented approach when reviewing the project, which means that our analysis allow us to make sure that A, the project produces enough revenues in order to cover the cost, B, that it produces enough profits in order to repay the investor, the entrepreneur in the company, and 3, that the project produces enough cash in order to be able to repay the financial obligations, meaning the loan or the loans, because DBK often intervenes with other banks. Now, the system seemed to work quite well. As a matter of fact, at the end of 2018, 0.28% of the gross loan portfolio was classified as non-performing loans, which by any standard, domestic or international, is quite good. How do we do this? We follow the client, as I said, in all the phases of the loans. When it comes to assessing the project, when it comes to disbursing the loans, when it comes to servicing and the repayment of the project. And we systematically do this by looking at the economics of the project with an approach which is an investment bank type of approach. And when I say we look at the economics, we look at the income statement, so profit and loss of the project. We look at the balance sheet, how the investments, assets and liabilities are going, and very important, of course, as well, the cash flow, which is the cash position of the company on an ongoing basis. When we do this, we are able to accompany the client in the life of the project, and also we are looking to assess ongoing how the ability of the client to repay the loan is evolving and if it's still there. It's important to mention that when we accept to provide loans, we require a pledge in terms of collateral. But it's also important to understand that our objective is not to come to the execution of the collateral, which will be an extreme measure, and we want to make sure, on the contrary, that the client repays ongoing. Because this means that the project is healthy enough that the client does repay. And therefore, what we do, in some cases, and when the project deserves, if there are difficulties on the part of the client, we restructure projects. This is a possibility. It's not given because it comes through a phase of reassessing the overall engagement with the client, but it's possible.
On the DBK board of directors, you are in charge of risk management issues. So what risks did the bank have to work hard on? And in particular, how relevant are the currency risks in DBK?
DBK provides loans in tenges, but also in US dollars. Now, it's important to state that in the past few years, we systematically provide loans in US dollars or in foreign currencies in that respect, but mainly in US dollars in terms of currency, only when the revenues of the client are totally or mainly in US dollars. This because if that's the case, then those revenues in US dollars will be a implicit shield against the fluctuation of the currency. It's not always been like that. There used to be loans provided in USD, also in situations where the revenues of the client were not in US dollars, or there were situations where the revenues of the clients over time became less US dollars and more tenges. In the past few years, this is the data point that I wanted to provide. In the past few years, the share of loans in tenges has more than doubled, from 21% to 43% of the portfolio. And the share of the US dollars loans has decreased from 78% to 57%. Now, it's happened that following the devaluation of the tenge, some companies that had loans in USD but not revenues or not enough revenues to shield against the fluctuation, they had difficulties because they found themselves in a situation where the amount of tenge equivalent of the loan was much higher. Yeah, because now in those situations, it happened that we reassessed the overall state of the project. We reassessed the economic fundamentals of the project, and there were situations where we restructured, meaning concretely that there were two things mainly. One, the amount still due was converted into tenge, from USD to tenges, at the current exchange rate. And two, in order to allow the client to be able to repay, to reorganize the payment schedule, maybe making it longer but smaller at every installment, in order to guarantee the financial and cash viability of the project. But let me state again that this has happened only exclusively in situations where the project is still fundamentally good, and then this, let's call it, incident of the devaluation put some stress on the project. And only because the project was good, we decided as bank to restructure the project.
You started working at the DBK during the period when changes in the bank's lending procedures and approaches to project financing were introduced. So how did these initiatives end?
Well, the initiative didn't end, it's continuing. And as a matter of fact, in the past 2 years, there were 11 applications for project financing. Now, what's very interesting is that 100% of those 11 applications came from projects which are green finance related, so specifically production of energy from alternative and environment-friendly sources. 3 of those projects, by the way, have been financed. And what's really important in the project financing is, by nature, it's a type of financing that is appropriate for projects that are off balance sheet, where there will be a period of big investment and then a stream of revenues once the project is commissioned and starts to work. And therefore, projects like large infrastructure, typically environmentally friendly energy production, these are quite a good example. So it's not by chance that all the projects that were applied for loan at DBK were all from that sector. Now, I believe that going forward, DBK should continue to use this type of instrument in order to push for more environmentally friendly type of development in the country. And by nature, by the way, the project financing heavily involves the private sector. And in turn, this becomes also a sustainable development of the private sector economy, which by any means is the way in the future for the development of the economy. More generally, my belief is that DBK should continue to look for more and more of this type of financial instruments to develop not only green energy, green finance, which is a very important component, but also other fundamental pillars of sustainable development. And I'm thinking about topics like gender balanced type of growth, youth-based type of growth, innovation growth. So all those components that can steer the development of the Kazakh economy into a path where there is more long-term sustainability so not only diversification of the economy, but diversification in a long-term sustainable manner.
And in your perspective, in the what needs to be changed in the activities of DBK?
DBK doesn't have to change fundamentally. I mean, DBK has been created as a tool for development, diversification and development of the economy. And as of today, that initial idea has translated into an excellent tool, meaning that DBK has a very strong team, high level education, often with international educational background and or international work experience. Two, there are the procedures in the company that allow to assess, administer and manage loans for the diversification of the economy. And three, there is a strategic plan that is not only approved, of course, by the board of directors, but it's fully supported by the sole shareholders and the government. So I would say all the elements are there for DBK. So to your question, I don't see need to change. Eventually, what I would like to contribute on is use this excellent tool in order to more and more support the sustainable development of the country.
Mr. Soma, thank you so much for the interview.